Perfect. So we're good now. Session is being recorded. So good evening, everybody. My name is LP Mainville. I'm the Athlete Development Director for the OVA. And it's a pleasure for me to be online with you tonight for this session on seasonal planning. So this session tonight is going to be around the seasonal templates that were created for the early contact. The early contact initiative streams. So recently on the website, a few weeks ago, we published some seasonal plan templates to help coaches who are entering these new streams that were just created in our competition system, and to support you guys. And so these seasonal plans are there for you to use. And in this session, we're going to dive into them into a little bit of detail to see how they work. And by doing so, the participants in this session, so you guys should be able to get a good idea of how to use them, but also perhaps how to create your own seasonal plan. Okay, so in this session, obviously, I mentioned the three streams. So the three early contact streams are the 4-on-4 rally ball, 6v6 rally ball, and the traditional non-specialized. In this session, we are going to work from the 6v6 rally ball seasonal plan. All right. So if you are coaching in another stream, don't worry. All the plans are built the same way. And just by looking at the 6v6 rally ball plan, you will get a very good understanding of how the one for your stream works. So I just wanted to mention that this session is intended for new coaches or coaches who have been around but have never really used a seasonal plan. So that's kind of the level that I'm looking at with this presentation. Now, if you are a bit more experienced and you have worked with seasonal plans in the past and you're used to building your own, that's no problem. You may pick up a few things here, a few ideas that you can implement in your seasonal planning. And if there are some of you in that situation on the call, please feel free to ask questions, and it will be a pleasure for me to answer a question from a more advanced perspective. If that's the case. Okay, so speaking of questions, I'm alone to manage this session tonight. So please enter your questions in the chat. And when I finish certain sections, I will go to the chat, try to answer the questions that are relevant. And then I'll circle back to answer all questions at the end of the presentation. Okay. So, allons-y. The learning objectives for tonight, I mentioned a couple of them, but we're going to look at what is a seasonal plan. We're going to look at why a seasonal plan is a useful tool to use and to have. And obviously, we're going to look at the specific template that was posted on the website and how you can use it. Now, let me just get out of here for 1 second, just to make sure that we're all on the same page in case someone doesn't know what I'm talking about here. The seasonal plan templates are available on our website. If you go on the early contact page, this is available through Parent and Players indoor competitions. You go there, and if you come down here, you have the 3 streams, and if you click on one of them, it will take you, for example, to the 4v4 rally ball webpage. And here on the right, you have a bunch of resources for coaches. And this is where the seasonal plan template is, if you want to use it. And there's a guide that will also help you use it. So all this information is on the website. So just in case you were not already aware. I will come back to this page later as well to show you some more information that you can find here. So let's get back to our presentation. And let's get right into our first objective here. Now, I want to make this full screen. I'm not sure if that's full screen for you, but it's not for me. Okay. Weird. I got out of here and then now it's not working. One sec. Sorry for that. I've got too many Zoom windows open. I can't actually manipulate my stuff. Sorry for that. Okay. I think I got it here. There you go. Okay. Let's do this again. Well, I like this better. Okay. Now we have to start from the beginning. Great stuff. Okay. All right, we're on our way. So what is a seasonal plan? Let's get talking about seasonal planning. So a seasonal plan is a tool, okay? It's a tool that us coaches use to help us with our coaching. It's a tool that essentially helps you visualize all of your team's activities, throughout the year. It's a place where you can put everything and you can get a big, snapshot, a big overview of everything you're going to do with your team this coming season. One of the great things about a seasonal plan is that it lets you identify the objectives for your team for the season. And you can then place the objectives where you want them throughout the 8 months of your season, okay? And you're not stuck just working from result objectives, which would be objectives such as go from Trillium to Championship to Select, something like this, right? Like winning tournaments would be a result objective. Finishing in Tier 1 of Division 1 at Provincials would be a results objective, right? The seasonal plan lets you set some performance objectives as well, which are really the objectives that you need to achieve if you want to achieve your results objectives, right? If you want to finish in Tier 1 at Provincials, well, you're probably going to need to pass very well, have a good offensive and defensive system. You're going to have to serve well, etc. So you're going to want to meet certain performance objectives throughout the season, and your seasonal plan lets you set that up and visualize it. And not only that, but it lets you identify the ways with which you are going to achieve your objectives. Okay, so that's what a seasonal plan is. It's most often presented in the form of a calendar, because a calendar is what will help you, visualize the beginning of the season all the way to the end of the season and see the progression, okay, in your objectives and in the activities that you're going to do. Because it has a lot of information, a lot of that information is summarized and often presented in terms of codes. So once we get into the seasonal template, a seasonal plan template, I'll explain what some of the codes in there mean. And your seasonal plan can really be as simple or complex as you need it to be. Okay, so depending on your experience with coaching, on your knowledge, on your willingness to put time into it, okay, you can have a very, very simple plan with very little information, just what you need. Or you can have a really complex plan where you're really diving into all sorts of things and you're being really, really detailed up to some individual players' objectives and all that stuff. If you have the time and want to put the work in, right? So it's really up to you to make your seasonal plan as complex as you need it to be. And that's one thing that's important to know, because I think that a lot of coaches will stop themselves from using a seasonal plan because they are afraid it's going to get too complex. Well, it doesn't have to be. Okay, you can keep it very, very simple. And the seasonal plan template that we provided you on the website, although they may look complex, are fairly simple and simple to use. And we're going to go into that in just a second. So I've kind of touched a little bit on why a seasonal plan is useful, but I wanted to mention 5 reasons that I think you really need to use a seasonal plan. Okay, 5 reasons why I definitely use one when I coach. And the first one is to make sure that I'm systematically training towards the objectives that I've set for the team, right? When it's easy when we coach and we just go from practice to practice, from tournament to tournament, to be guided by what we see in the moment. Okay, so we realize that our athletes are not passing well, and then we start wanting to focus on passing. And then we do a lot of passing and we forget to address other skills. And then we find another problem and then we try to fix that. And we're always chasing problems as opposed to setting some goals and setting some benchmarks that we want to achieve, and then sticking to that plan that that will take us there, and not being distracted by some things that may happen throughout the season and throughout tournaments and all that stuff. It doesn't mean we're not going to adjust anything, but at least with a seasonal plan, we can make sure that we're checking all the boxes that we want to check in order for our athletes to get the development that we want. Okay. Now, another big piece for me is that a seasonal plan, when we build it based on LTAD recommendations, that would be the long-term development model recommendations for the stage of development of our athletes. Well, we know that by the end of the year, we'll have done the best we can at providing these athletes with this specific stage of development with the best possible training that they can get, because we've structured it around the recommendations of this model that's been designed based on evidence-based research, with obviously people way smarter than I am at working on this and providing guidelines. So that's a big plus for the season plan. Now, like I mentioned, you may at some point want to adjust your plan. You may at some point notice something with your athletes that you want to address, and that's fine. Now, with your plan, what you do in that case, if you are using a seasonal plan, is you would then just adjust a little bit of the activities that you have. You may shift some of your objectives, push them a little, push the date at which you want to achieve them a little further or a little earlier, and you would just tweak things, but you would make sure that everything is still aligned and that you're still working towards all of your objectives, and you're not just being distracted by this one thing that now you become obsessed with. Okay, so a seasonal plan is made to be adjusted and worked with. It's not meant to be fixed the entire year, but at least it's there to help you make sure you want to do everything you want to do. I mentioned before that you can include some performance goals in a seasonal plan, and I think that's one very big benefit of using one. So it really allows us to focus on that and not just be focused on those medals and those wins. It helps us focus on the process a bit more. And speaking of process, I highlighted this one in green because to me, it's probably the biggest benefit of using a seasonal plan. At least for me, I find it very, very easy to plan for a practice when I'm using a seasonal plan. Why? Well, we'll get into it in a second when we look at it, but essentially your plan, because it essentially outlines everything you're going to do every week to achieve some objectives, you can look at a certain week and know exactly what you need to work on. And so you're kind of eliminating the thinking about, okay, what do I need to work on today? It's in there. Your priorities are listed in there. So all you got to do is find a couple of drills that will address this priority, right? So in terms of practice planning, it makes it a lot easier and gets a lot of the thinking out of the way. So it's a little bit of work at the beginning of a season to establish everything. You do a lot of the thinking ahead of time, but then once you're in the grind, and most of you guys are volunteer coaches, I suppose. So you have your day job, you have your families, you have to get to practice. You may not have a lot of time. Well, with your seasonal plan, you know exactly that, okay, today we're going to work on serving. You do that. You plan to practice with that serving as a focus. And right there, you already know that your practice is going to fit with the rest of your season, that it's going to fit with what you did yesterday. It's going to fit with what you're doing tomorrow. and it's going to take you to where you want to go in the future. So the components of the plan, and those are the components of the plans that are in the seasonal template that is available on the website. It's pretty basic, but I mentioned we'll have some long-term development recommendations in our seasonal plan, because that's what we're going to use to make sure that our seasonal plan is appropriate for our athletes. There's the calendar itself, where you see all the weeks of your season. You will include the competitions that you're going to attend. You're going to include the skills you're going to want to work on. That is technical, tactical skills, physical skills, psychological skills, any other skills you want to develop. You're going to want to include that in your seasonal plan. You're going to include your objectives and any other team activities that you may do throughout the season. Okay, so very simple things that you can include in there for a basic seasonal plan. Now, just to show you how complex you can make this, this is not included in the seasonal plan template that is available for early contact, but you can go a lot further with a seasonal plan, where you can start charting and outlining the volume and the intensity that you want to have in your practices, so you can manage the load of the athletes throughout the season. Sometimes maybe there's a heavy load, sometimes there's a lower load. You can start considering the non-volleyball activities of your athletes and plotting that into your seasonal plan to see where the big moments of stress for your athletes are going to be. So you have a better understanding of what they're going through, you know. You can start periodizing so that, you know, you're maybe creating some fatigue and then resting and trying to peak for some competitions, all right, etc. There's a lot of things that you can include in a plan. So when we go through this plan today, as you're taking some notes, please feel free to take notes on things that you would like to add to this plan. Okay. All right. So let's get out of here and let's get into the season plan itself. All right. Before I go there, I'm just going to check the chat, and I don't see any questions, so that's great. I'm just going to grab a sip of water and then we'll get into it. Okay. So this, I'm going to make this full screen so that we see everything. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so this is the season plan that is available to you on the website. Okay, so assuming you've seen this before, you've noticed that in the top corner, we've got our LTD recommendations. Okay, so because we're working from a rally ball 6v6 girls season, you know, and with our planning here, we know that we're working with early train to train athletes. All right, so if I go to the long-term development document for volleyball, I'm going to see that the format of the game for this division is triple ball. We're talking about girls age 12 and 13, maybe a bit younger. We know that the length of our season is going to be between 22 and 30 weeks. Those are the recommendations from LTD. We know that we're going to have between 4 and 6 hours of training per week. The recommendations is to have 1 match per week or about 1 tournament per month. Okay, and our competition training ratio is 60% to 40%. So when I'm building a seasonal plan, I have this at the top here. I start working on a plan, and at the end, I look over here to see if I meet those recommendations. So with this plan, if you look at the training to competition ratio right here, 60 to 40, we meet that perfectly, okay, with the plan that we've designed here. So that's great. We're meeting LTD recommendations. Now, in terms of tournaments, and I'll get into the details here, but we have the competitions are in this line here, this row. Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 competitions, and there's pretty much 7 months in my season. So I've got 1 tournament per month. I'm good to go. Okay, 4 to 6 hours of training per week. the hours of training, we'll get into it, are listed here. And as you can see, there's 4 hours for each week, 4 hours of training. Okay, so I'm on the lower end here. And my season has 30 weeks exactly. So I'm on the higher end of the recommendation here, but I still meet the recommendations. All right. So when I plan my season, I like to always look at these recommendations and try to match them as much as possible. Now, it's not always possible. Sometimes you'll be a little higher, a little lower. This is just the reality. Sometimes clubs and teams, I have a hard time finding enough training hours just because of gym availabilities. This year, it may be, a particularly important problem, depending on where you are and the availability of the gyms in your area. But the idea here is to do our best to meet those recommendations. Okay, and all of the seasonal plan templates that we provided, all do that. Okay, all meet the recommendations of LTD as close as possible. So now, this is something we would check once we're done. Okay, doing our season plan. But let's get into the template itself. All right. The first thing that you're going to do, and the way to use this, okay, is very, very simple. This is your season. You've got your weeks at the top here, okay, numbered 1 to 30. And the data you see here is always the Monday of the week. Okay, so October 4th is going to be a Monday. October 11th is going to be a Monday. All right. This is done so that we can have all of the activities of the week, okay, all in that one line, including our competition. Okay, so in that row below here, you have all of the competitions, and those are all the dates that are in the OVA Indoor Youth Competition calendar. Okay, so those are the correct dates. And you will notice that this event here, I can't remember the exact date, but I think it's on the 13th of November. Okay, so this event here, when I'm plotting all my competitions in my calendar, I always put it in the week, okay, that starts the Monday before my competition. Okay, so because this competition is on November 13th, maybe I'd be tempted to put it in this column here because it's closest to the 15th, but it's at the end of this week here. So it's important to include it in here. Why? Well, you're going to see later as we start adding activities to our week, knowing that on week 6, I have a competition, I can then adjust ahead of time the amount of training I will do, okay, in order to get ready. So I can have maybe a little bit more competition during the week and maybe a little bit less physical training, for example. Okay, so very important to have that tournament in the week identified by the Monday before the competition. All right, so this is how it works and why it's there. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do when you build one, if you're interested in building your own, is you're going to plot these competitions in there, because they're going to be your landmarks, okay, for how everything else is going to unfold. Because at the end of the day, you are training for development, but all of your competitions are going to be great times to assess your team and know if your plan is working. Okay. So after that, pretty simple. We've got the 5 days of the week. Obviously, in this example, the team has a practice on Monday and Wednesday, but it could be anything else, right? And this is where you're going to include the number of hours that you're going to spend on technical and tactical training on court. All right, so all of these squares right here represent the number of hours you're going to spend on training skills, warming up. Okay. Once you've done this, we now get into competition hours. So your competition are listed up here so that they're top, right? At the very top, they're very easy to see. But then we have the number of hours we want to spend competing. And we need the number of hours because we want a ratio at the end. Okay, we want it to be calculated here. So there's going to be 2 types of competition. There's going to be my weekday competition, the stuff that I do at practice. And there's going to be the competition hours that I do at competitions. So in this line here, and I color coded, the numbers here so that it'll be easy to see what practice, these hours are for. Okay, so Wednesday is orange, Monday is blue. So here we see that my weekday competition hours are going to be on the Wednesday. So that means that in practice, I'm going to be doing probably some 6-on-6 triple ball or any other sort of competition, modified competition between my players, where it's not just skill training. Okay, and this will count towards our total competition time for our ratio. And then here we have the typical number of hours that athletes are playing at an OVA tournament. Okay, so I would put that there in the week associated with the tournament. Finally, here I've got physical training. So in this template, I'm including the number of hours. I guess in this case, for the most part, it's half an hour that is going to be spent each week on physical training components. All right. And then obviously, because it's blue, it's going to happen on a Monday. Okay, very easy to see here. And then here you would put anything else that you'd like to see. Now, I could have included some example of things that most teams do, such as team building and all that stuff. But I didn't want to get into that. I think every team is different and is going to have their own activities and their own preferences around that. So I've pretty much left this whole line blank, and it's going to be for you as you're using it to fill this up with any other activities that you want. But this actually helps you see where it's going to happen in the season. For example, if you wanted to do a fundraiser on a weekend, well, you would easily see with this calendar that it's not a good idea to do it, this week on a weekend of November 13 to 14 because you got a tournament. Okay, so you can pick another week in that case, right? The things that I did include though is the physical testing, right? And the reason for that is because, and we're going to talk about this a bit later, but the reason we have a plan is to achieve some objectives, okay? And we're going to get into the objectives a bit later as we go through the document. But the way we can achieve objectives is if we can measure stuff, right? And we're definitely going to have some objectives in terms of skill development, tactical development, physical development, and it's important to measure them, those skills. And so one really good way to do this with physical skills is to actually plan some physical testing at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of the season. Okay, and so that is why you would see that during those weeks, the physical training hours is a bit longer because testing is going to take a little bit of time, and you need to, you need to take the time to do it, right? You also have time off. Okay, so those would be the 2 weeks of Christmas. If you did activities at Christmas during the Christmas break, you could include that in there, and then it would be calculated towards your ratio. Same thing during March break. Okay, but typically most teams in the OVA, especially at the Rally Ball 6v6, which would be around 13U, most teams would be off. So this plan has that time marked as time off. Okay. Now, I want to point out something in here, and to add, to talk about the reason why you would want to have your competition, okay, at the end of the week. All right. So in here, when I'm looking at week 6, and I know I have a competition at the end of the week, I see that I'm going to do an hour and a half of training on Monday. It's going to be tactical training. I'm only going to do an hour technical training on the Wednesday, and I'm going to do an hour of competition because I'm going to prepare for this competition. Okay, so, and an hour is more than what I've done so far in the season because it's the beginning of the season and I wanted to focus more on skill development, for example, right? If you look at other seasonal plans, not for this particular stream, you will see that some of the plans will have lower load for training on the Monday following a competition. This is something you may want to do. So because you know that this is a competition week, and you know that perhaps your competition is on a Sunday, so maybe your competition is on the 14th of November, and the next day you have a practice, and your athletes played all day the day before. Maybe you want to take it easy. So maybe you want this to be 0.5, and you're just going to do a little warm up, and you're going to do a big stretch, and you're going to have an hour of kind of stretching and relaxation and yoga or whatever. And then here you're going to have a half-hour team building. Right? You can do it that way, right? Your seasonal plan allows you to do that. And I encourage you to do that and to modify this to really, suits your needs. This is the beauty of a seasonal plan. This is why we have one, right? To make those adjustments. So I really like this format. This is a format, by the way, that I took for this chart here. I took from Volleyball Canada and adapted it a little bit and added some stuff at the bottom. I love this chart. I find it really, really easy to see, to use, and it's really easy to visualize everything for club for volleyball. Okay. So now that you have kind of all your time and how are you going to use your time, okay, with your athletes, we can now start looking at the skills, okay, and what we're going to work on. So the seasonal plan template, okay, that I'm showing here, that is available to you, has the 6 main skills for technical development. All right. And I really, really enjoy this. When I coach club, I use this all the time. I always had one, always had this table here. And the reason why is because we're working with really young athletes, we know they need to work on everything. Okay. It's not a question. They need to work on everything. They need to get better at all skills. And I want to make sure that by the end of the season, I've worked on all skills at least a little bit. Okay. And that I didn't necessarily overtrain a certain skill, over another one. Okay. So using this, I can say that during the week of October 4th, on the Monday, which is blue, I will work on attacking. That will be the focus of my practice. And on the Wednesday, which is orange, I'm going to focus on setting. So this is the piece that really helps with practice planning, okay? Because you chart this throughout the entire season, and then you can see as you build your seasonal plan, okay, look at this. I'm going to spend 12 sessions focusing on passing, 12 sessions focusing on attacking. So for 6v6 rally ball, they're young. Those are probably good skills to work on. I'm going to be doing 8 sessions with a focus on setting, but I know that when I have attacking, I'm going to have a lot of setting as a secondary skill. So that's fine. I'm going to do 10 sessions focusing on serving. Okay. So that's good. That means I'm also probably going to get a little bit of passing out of it. So 10 is fine for me. And then when I look at blocking, I'm only going to spend 5 sessions focused on blocking. And, at the 6v6 rally ball, blocking is probably not a skill that is of the top importance. It's going to be important later. And we're definitely going to talk a little bit of blocking, and we're going to do a lot of it when we play. But I'm not going to focus on it too much, just because I would prefer focus on other skills. Okay. And I can, indicate that in my season plan. And same thing with digging. Okay. I know I'm going to spend 7 sessions. So if I'm happy with these numbers, then I leave it that way and I'm good to go. And I know that on October 4th, these will be my 2 priorities. Now, does that mean that I'm getting to my first practice and all I do is attacking? Of course not. But knowing this, I can make sure that the portion of my practice that is going to be focused on learning and acquiring new skills and new language and new cues, well, that's going to be done around attacking. All right. So that I make sure that when my athletes are the most focused and rested, they're going to be learning mostly about attacking. Okay. Obviously in volleyball, we always play all skills. Okay. So it's very, very hard to just do attacking unless you have your athletes hit against the wall all practice, and you're never going to do that. Right. So they're going to practice all the skills, but at least you know that when you plan your practice, the focus of your drills is going to be around attacking. Your objectives and learning objectives for the athletes is going to be around attacking. Okay, and you can already start planning for your key teaching points. And if you look at the first portion of this table, you'll notice some letters. I had an email today actually about this, asking about the letters. What are the letters? Well, if you look at, sorry, I'm just gonna move this here. If you look at the file, there's another tab here, teaching points. And if you click on that, you will have some suggested teaching points for each of the 6 skills. Now, there's room here for you to add your own. These are the ones that we suggest at the OVA. Okay, so it's not to say that they're the best ones and that they're the ones you should absolutely use. They're just a suggestion. They're good teaching points, but they may not be the best for you. Okay, so you've got room here. You can change this, you can edit this if you want. You just put your own teaching points in there. Okay, so for example, for passing, you know that you're going to work on moving. Okay, there's going to be a movement component to passing. You know you're going to want to talk about, you know, the position of the body at contact. You know you want to teach about the platform and how to use, you know, the arms to pass the ball. So where you want the athletes to have their feet. So all of the things that you want to teach about passing, you can break it down in here. And when you go back, and actually it's coded here with letters, and when you go back to your table here, you would indicate them in here. Okay, so then in this case, that means that on my first practice, I know I'm working on attacking, but I also know that my teaching points are going to be C and D. So it's going to be hitting shoulder back, okay, before the hit, and a fast arm high in front. And those are the 2 things I'm going to focus on in the practice, so that at the end of the session, the athletes, what they got out of it, if I ask them, what did you learn today? They're going to say, well, I learned to bring my hitting shoulder back when I hit, and to hit with a fast arm and have a high contact. Okay. So I know that if I plan, you know, the skills properly, and I include those teaching points all the way through, I know that I'm going to cover all of them. And this is, I want to go back to what I said earlier. And I said, when you don't have a plan, it is very easy to start focusing just on a couple of them and then forgetting a couple of them for a few weeks, and then maybe coming back to one of them, right? And maybe we're focusing just on attacking and we're forgetting to work on setting. And maybe we work on setting a little bit when we work on attacking, but all the teaching we do is always around attacking, and we never really go into the teaching points for setting, right? When I'm using a plan, I can make sure that I'm going to address every single teaching point that's important to me throughout my season, right? And at any point during my season, I can stop and I can say, oh, wait, I thought we would be, ready to progress at this point to the next teaching points, but we're not. So I'm just going to review everything, lower maybe the expectation for this skill for the season, and just replan my skills and my teaching points for the year. Okay. In this template, I've included the teaching points only for the first part, just as an example, because obviously I feel like this could be appropriate for a wide majority of athletes at this level for the first part. But because everyone will evolve at a different pace, I did not include anything here. And I would rather coaches start putting their own in there because they're going to know obviously what's best for their athletes, because they know where their athletes are at. Okay. So I see there's a couple of notifications here. So I'm just going to go into the questions. So I got a question here about the tabs. Yes. So the first tab here, by the way, in the template, if you open it, the first tab, you can't edit. Okay. If you click here, nothing happens. The second tab has editable plan. This one you can't edit. So this is the one that you're going to want to edit and make your own. The reason why this one is not editable is so that you can go back to it. You don't have to re-download it. Okay, if you want to go back to, oh, wait, how was this structured? How was this set up? You can go back to it, so you have kind of the suggestion, and then you can do your own in here. That's the only reason. Kelvin asks a good question. Okay, competition hours, is it the time on court at a tournament? or just physically being at a tournament? That is a good question. And yes, it is the number of hours that your team is competing. Okay, so that's why it's 5 here. So an OVA tournament, when we play a 9-team tournament, most teams have 2 pool play matches, and we'll have on average 3 matches after for playoffs. There's always a team that only gets 4 games, but on average, it's about 5 hours. It works well for the template. So that's the number of hours that's there. Now, I'm going to say this now. We could get on a tangent here, but we won't. But I'm just going to say, if you wanted to be even more detailed, okay, with this template, and this is something that I would do personally for my team because I like the details, is I would actually look at the average time spent on court during competition by each individual player on average. Okay, so if I have a team of 10 players at Rally Ball 6v6 versus if I have a team of 14 players, that's going to be a different number because I've got fair play. And it's happened to me before where 1 year I had 14 players. So when I did my season plan, I had to look at, okay, wait, we're going to go to a tournament, but I'm not going to get 5 hours of competition for each of my players. Each player is probably going to get 2.5 hours of competition, really, throughout the day, because I've got so many players and I want to play everybody as equally as possible. So what I had to do that year was I had to identify some competitions in which I had to split my team into 2 smaller teams so they would get more competition so I could hit my ratio, right? So again, another really useful thing about the seasonal plan is it allows you to kind of plan that and see what you're actually getting and what your athletes are actually getting. Right? Okay, so I want to move on to this portion here because I think this is very important, and I think this is something that is overlooked by a lot of coaches. But when we plan it as part of a seasonal plan, it's really easy and simple to address physical skills. Okay, I know that we have little time on court with our athletes, and we want to focus on the skills, on the technical and tactical skills. But if you look at LTD, if you look at the development of your athletes, physical skills are really, really important. I can just speak of some Team Ontario athletes that we see that come who are very skilled, but they come to our camps and some of them are limited in what they can do technically because they haven't developed the strength yet, and they don't have the physical skills to actually apply the skills at the level we need them to do it. Okay, so developing physical skills throughout an athlete's development is really, really important. And it's pretty simple to do it if you have a plan like this. All right, so I'll speak to what this is, and this is very specific to the Rally Ball 6v6, but it's very similar to the other groups as well, 4v4 and traditional and specialized, because those athletes are very close in terms of development, and the recommendations for young athletes are very similar, for athletes, from 12 to 14, 15-year-olds. Okay, so this table lists 5 physical abilities that are important for athletes of this age. Okay, so we've got maximum speed, strength, endurance, flexibility, mobility, agility, coordination, balance. Okay, so speed max, it's pretty easy. I'm moving as fast as possible. Okay, so speed of movement. Strength endurance would be the ability, for example, to do many push-ups. Okay, so it's not I can lift a very heavy weight once. It's I can lift or push a decent amount of weight many, many times. Okay, so that's kind of what happens when you do body weight exercises, such as push-ups and air squats and that type of stuff. Flexibility, mobility, pretty simple. We're looking at maintaining flexibility in the tissues, muscles, tendons, skin, even for kids who are growing really, really fast at that age. All right. And when they grow fast, they can lose a lot of mobility and it can make everything, all the movements really hard. Okay. Agility and coordination. So footwork, eye-hand coordination, that type of stuff. And balance. Obviously, balance. I don't know how else to explain balance. So as you can tell here, okay, we've got our weeks again. And what this shows here is which skill is going to be the focus for our little half hour of physical training each week on our Monday session, because it's blue. Okay, so if you look every week, we've got about half an hour of physical training. All right. Now, what that means is that throughout my session, for example, this week, I'm going to do half an hour of physical training. Now, what LTD tells us and what Volleyball Canada recommends in the Development Coach Workshop for coaches, coaching athletes of this age, is to include speed work at the beginning of each practice. Okay, so this template follows this recommendation and says that for 5 minutes at the beginning of practice, once we're done our warm-up, we're always going to do a little 5 minutes of speed work. Okay, whether that's sprints, forward, backward, sideways, whatever, we're going to do 5 minutes of speed work. So already there, I have 5 minutes. So I only have to put another 25 minutes into my session. Okay. And here I know that that week I'm going to do agility and coordination. So I'm going to pull out some ladders. I may take out some balls and have the kids kind of juggle. Now I'll go, oh, wait, I'm talking about kind of like little juggling exercises or ladder exercises. That's interesting. Sounds like something I can do during my warm-up as well. Okay. So now I can look at this and say, okay, well, for this first week, maybe I get another 5 or 10 minutes of agility and coordination work done during my warm-up. Okay, because I'm going to get the kids to play a game where they throw and catch balls, that type of stuff. And they're going to also do some ladder work or some hurdles, and it's going to help them work on that agility. So now I've got 15 minutes already taken care of, and I can keep another 10 minutes at the end of practice to do some more specific work on this. Okay. Now, if you look at every week, you'll see that there's a different focus every week. Okay. And that's how I would plan for that portion of my session, that I make sure that I address physical training. It can be half an hour at the very end of practice, or it can be, like I just mentioned, broken down throughout your session in different phases of your practice. Okay. Now, I really recommend that you work with someone who knows what they're doing in terms of planning these exercises. Okay. If you have some training in being a trainer, okay, and prescribing physical training activities to athletes, please feel free to do your own stuff. But I would really suggest that you speak to someone who's done a little bit of this before or is a professional, so that they can help you find a series of exercises that are safe for athletes that you can then mix and match and use during the practice. For strength endurance, for example, that would be a place where I would definitely suggest you do this. Speak to someone, they can give you like a program, let's say, of 10 exercises that are good to develop strength endurance. And maybe you pick 5 every time you have one of those sessions, and then you do them 3 or 4 times with your athletes, and it covers your time of physical training, right? Yeah, so that would be my little warning and suggestion. Obviously, you see here the times we have testing. We don't have actual training, but we're using our time for physical training for our testing. And if you see the yellow here, okay, and you'll see there's yellow every single week, that is because in this plan, we're suggesting that you give your athletes a flexibility and mobility program and routine to do at home every week. Okay. So not only will they do it as a group in practice once in a while when they're at practice. Okay, so for example, the week of the 18th, on the Monday, we're going to do our flexibility and mobility routine. We may do a little bit of that as part of our warm-up, actually, as well. But there will be this more generic flexibility, at least, program that athletes are going to do every single week, whether that's once, twice, 3 times a week on their own at home. That stuff is really, really important. Like I've mentioned, these athletes are growing really, really fast, and it's very easy for them to quickly lose flexibility and mobility and then create all sorts of chronic injuries. As you know, they grow, everything gets tighter, they move, they get stronger, but they're more tight. Anyways, lots of issues that can arise from not maintaining proper flexibility as you grow. Okay, so that would be the suggestion here. Again, it's really good to have your competitions and your season plan, and having a seasonal plan allows you to see what you want to do during a competition week. And if you look at the calendar here, you'll notice that for every competition week, we never do strength endurance. All right. So every time we have a competition week, we do agility and coordination. And the reason is this is probably the type of work that's most likely to engage the nervous system, okay, and prime it for later in the week for athletes to be ready to compete and play well and play hard and not be fatigued, right? If, for example, during our session on the week of a competition, I had my athletes do 150 push-ups, a bunch of sit-ups and squats and so on, maybe they get to the tournament on the weekend and they're tired, and now I'm not getting the performance that I was hoping out of the athletes, right? Now, it's up to you. You may want to get them fatigued at some point so that they learn how to compete under fatigue. In this case, maybe you do put strength endurance here on that week. But again, this is something you can adjust and that you can think about as you plan your season, okay? But again, it's impossible. I don't want to say impossible, but very, very difficult to achieve this level of alignment, okay, and an intention in what you do if you don't have this plan. And if you're just kind of going, oh, well, this week I'm going to do this, and oh, this week I'm going to do this, okay? At the end of the year, who knows what you've done? With this, you know exactly what you've done, and you know that you've covered your basis and you've offered your athletes the best possible training, all right? So, just moving on to the last section here. And by the way, I'll mention the, actually it's not the last, second last section. I will mention it in a couple minutes once I'm done, but I'm going to do a session only on this, okay, where we're going to spend 45 minutes, an hour speaking just about this, and we'll look at all three streams, okay, in terms of the recommendations for the system and tactical objectives. So I'm going to go through them pretty fast now, but on September 13th at the same time, 8 o'clock, I'll have another session where I dive into this and we'll talk about the details and why those objectives were set up that way, okay? But the system and tactical objectives are what your athletes are going, how your athletes are going to play the game, all right? So they're related to your systems and yeah, what kind of team you want to be. You know, it's not just about learning the skills here, it's about how to apply the skills, okay? And again, having a seasonal plan allows you to establish a progression for your players. And I really, really like this, about the seasonal plan. So for example, you know that with triple ball, everyone's going to be a setter. And at the beginning, you know, if you're coming from 4-on-4 and you were playing on a smaller court and now you're playing on a bigger court, it may be difficult to push the ball all the way out to left side if you're sitting out of position 2, okay? So I can say here, well, we're going to start setting in position 3 for our first 2 events, and then we're going to move to setter in 2, and then we're going to move to setter in 1, okay? And I can do this kind of progression for each of the aspects of my tactics and systems, okay? And this, again, helps me a lot when I plan my practice, because if I go here and I look at October 25th on the Monday, my focus is going to be on passing. I'm going to have my teaching points focused on passing. It's going to be focused on my session. And I go back down, I go down here and I look at my serve receive. Oh, okay, well, if I end up doing some team serve receive, I know I'm going to work on my 5-player W formation because that's what I decided to use for the first 2 events, right? As you see here, there's a transition after the first event where now we go from a 5-player serve receive to a 4-player serve receive, okay? So that's how I set my objectives. The objectives I was talking to you about earlier, they're mainly in here. Because I say, okay, by the end of the season, I want to pass I want my team to pass with a 3-player cup. So only 3 players in service seat. But I'm going to need to progress to that because obviously the players may not be ready at the beginning of the season. Well, here's how I'm going to do it. Okay. And in practice, I'm going to work on these things. Right. So for example, with setting, I know that if I work on setting position 3, that means that every time I do an attacking warm-up or I do a setting activity, I'm going to make sure that athletes get a chance to set from position 3. Right. So this chart allows you to set those objectives and establish how you're going to progress to it. Now this, you can probably edit a lot and you're going to adjust a lot because you're going to come back to it and you're going to say, well, you know what, we did 2 tournaments. I don't think the players are ready to move to set in position 2. We're going to push that. And maybe you get to your 3rd event and you say, well, you know what, they're still not ready. And maybe you only end up at the end in set in position 2, and that's fine, right? You've got to go with what your players, where your players are at, and that's why you're using a season plan. Okay, so when you're looking at this, again, you're looking at which week you're in, and you know what you're going to work on. Now, the good thing about this is it allows you to plan ahead. All right, so you know that you're going to start working on set in position 2, okay, the last week before Christmas. Well, you're going to play set in position 3 in this tournament. But if you think your athletes can handle this, you can start working on set in position 2 earlier. But just say, hey, look, we're going to start introducing some set in position 2 here in, in the week of November 29th and December 6th. But at the tournament, we're still going to play our usual set in position 3. So we're just going to kind of start working on the skill of setting and pushing the ball further over here. But in terms of tactics, when we go to our tournament, we're going to stick to position 3 because that's what we're comfortable with now. And then we'll have a bit of time to set up and prepare for our next event where we move on to set in position 2. All right. So this chart, again, kind of combines with everything else to help you plan your season. Now, the last piece here is our psychological skills. Okay. So I mentioned when you're working with young athletes, you want to cover all the skills and you need to cover psychological skills. You could set up some sessions in here. So if you have access to a sports psychologist, for example, you could set up, a session here, session here, session here, something like that. Okay, where this person comes and talks to your athlete. It could be on Zoom now, right? Now we have this great tool. You could do it not at your practice. You could set it up at any time. But at this age, and actually at all ages, I believe, it's good to work on those psychological skills all the time and not necessarily just talk about them for half an hour, and then never talk about them again. Okay. Those are those are skills that are good to develop over time by having regular interactions with athletes and by actually potentially setting up your coaching philosophy and the way that you act, behave, and talk to your athletes in a way that will reinforce those skills. Okay. So that's why there's no calendar here. And we've made this suggestion again, just so that we are not making psychological skills a one-off thing that we do, but more like a regular thing that we do and a constant thing that we do. Okay, so those skills are pulled from the new Volleyball Canada LTD. By the way, this document is not available to the public yet, but it's coming. We were lucky enough to have access to it as a draft, so we know what's coming, and so that's why we included some of this. So the skills that were chosen were for this particular age group are self-awareness, self-evaluation, communication, and mindfulness. Okay. And so in this, again, this is a suggestion. Feel free to edit this, but the description is what we mean by self-awareness, by self-evaluation, etc. And here is going to be the plan to develop the skill. All right. And this can be anything you want. Okay? So once you've identified the skills and you've kind of, you're clear on what it is, and you're clear on what it is because you have written it in here, then you're going to go, okay, here's how I'm going to do this at practice. You can share this with your assistant coaches, with any parent coach that's helping you. You can share this with your players, obviously, and then everyone can then be part of the process of reinforcing those skills. Okay, so for example, for self-evaluation, we're describing the skill as having the ability to recognize whether or not your actions and decisions are aligned with your goals and intentions and values. Okay, so, in a nutshell, we're looking at some athletes. We know that they have certain goals, they want to improve something. And then are they able to recognize whether or not they're doing that? Are they is what they're doing helping them achieve achieve those goals, or are they doing what they say, essentially, right? And so the plan for this is going to be to use an inquiry-based coaching approach where coaches ask a lot of questions, and we're going to regularly ask players in practice to assess their performance. So perhaps at the end of a drill or at the end of a practice, we'll just randomly, or maybe we ask everybody, but we'll do this regularly. We'll ask questions and we'll check to see if they seem to align their actions with their goals and what they think, right? And we're going to develop that skill over time over the course of the season. Okay. Again, this probably an easier thing to just put on a piece of paper and have this in your coaching book and take with you at every practice. But again, when it's done in the context of a full seasonal plan, it helps. It really helps visualize everything that you're going to do with your athletes and make sure that you're covering your bases, all your bases. Okay. The template has a little table here that you can use to add anything else. Okay, so if you want to plan anything else that's not included in here, you could put that in there and plot it, throughout the season. All right. So feel free to use this this chart here. All right. Okay. So lots of information. It's already been an hour. I tend to speak a lot, but that's fine. We got through it. I wanted to. Oh yeah. So I wanted to add. Again, over here, you're going to do some testing for the physical skills. Make sure that in here at some point at the beginning of your season, somewhere in the middle, okay, and at the end, and this could be a competition, you start taking some stats, or you find a way to kind of assess your players on their technical skills and their tactical skills. Okay, so I didn't have time to include that in this document, but it will come in a little bit. We'll also include some stats taking sheets to help you measure these things. And those will be sheets that you can use at tournaments or in practice. You can use them yourself, or you can have your players stat different things. But we're going to include some sheets and some tools for you to help assess your players. But the assessment is going to be really, really important so that you can actually know where you're at and if you're on the right track to achieve the objectives at the end, right? So there's no way for you to know if your team is, doing 3 contacts on the free ball 80% of the time in triple ball, unless you're counting the number of times they do it, right? So we'll provide a chart for that. So stay tuned. But the measurement piece, the testing piece, and then following the plan all the way to the end and seeing where you landed and where you got is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to work with. It makes the job of a coach super easy, at least way easier than not using one. And one benefit that I did not talk about at the beginning, but that is very clear to me, is that, just from a perspective of showing the athlete and the parents, okay, the progression of the players, it's huge. Every time I've given a season plan like this to the parents of club athletes, they're always, whoa, okay, right? And I can tell them yeah, no, this is everything that we're going to do. So here you see, and you can explain it to them quickly. See, this is everything we're going to do. This is all the tournaments we have. This is all the time we're going to spend on training. This is all the time we're going to spend on physical training. We're going to work on these skills in terms of psychological skills. Okay. And that's what we're hoping to achieve by the end of the season. Okay. And here are our result goals, okay, that we want to do. You can present that to the parents. And then, if you have to do some major changes to your seasonal plan along the way, you can notify them. But if not, and if you keep track and things are going well and according to plan, okay, and you're making minor adjustments here and there, then at the end of the season, you can go back and say, hey, look at everything that we've done. We've hit all the benchmarks. We did what we wanted to do. Your players are now playing Southern Position 1 with a 6-back defense, and we're passing with 3 players on, and here's where we started. Okay, and just being able to do that is really nice for the parents. Okay, as a parent who's paying for their child to play with you, it's something that's really nice to know and to see. Okay, and I know that sometimes relationships between coaches and parents can be tense, and that may be a way to alleviate some of the tensions. Okay. See a couple of notifications. Okay. Question from Calvin. Snow days, or you lose a gym, do you shift the plan or skip those sections or modify? That's a great question, Calvin. And yeah, I always get so frustrated when there's a snow day. I hate snow days for this very reason, because you have a plan in place and it's going well, and now you're losing your practice, and now you got to shift things. Okay. Now that's the art of coaching. Okay. So for example, if we were, I don't know, like, the worst is when it happens on a week where you have a competition. But let's say we're the week of January 31st. So we have a tournament early in February. And the Monday is a snow day, and I don't have my gym here. So I lost my physical training, and I lost my hour and a half of skill training here that I wanted to do. And maybe I wanted to do a lot of serve receive, and perhaps some serving and serve receive, because I feel like the team really needs it to get ready for the competition. And now I don't get to do it. And now I only have an hour of skill training on Wednesday, and then I want to do some competition in practice so that we're ready to compete. And now you go, oh, what do I do? Well, again, that's the art of coaching. You got to know your athletes. Are they doing something else? Are they doing other activities that they have access to, leading to the Wednesday or to the Saturday? Like, do they really respond well to agility training? That like half an hour here on week 18 here, agility and coordination. Do they respond really well to that? And if so, maybe I choose to do it on the Wednesday. Maybe I choose to do 20 minutes of it, right? Because I missed it on the Monday. And maybe I feel like I don't need that much competition, and I would prefer working a little bit more on serve and serve receive, because I really think that that's going to help us at the tournament, right? Like, it's the kind of like thinking that you got to do. So I wouldn't say just forget it, go to the next right away, or push it down and shift everything else. I would really suggest you go, okay, how do I deal with this situation? During my week, what was the most important thing? Okay, what do I really want to achieve? And then let's combine the most important piece of both practices and put it in one. Right? And then if both practices were canceled, like I've seen before, really, really annoying, well, then you do the same. But then just looking at the following week. So that's the art of coaching. Okay, so I have athletes who compete in 2 sports, assuming both coaches are doing what you are teaching. Any thoughts on overtraining? Yeah, well, so Jeff, that's obviously a great question. If you know that your athletes are coaching or are playing 2 sports, now again, remember that what I said at the beginning, like this plan, was designed to help coaches who have little experience working with a seasonal plan. So it's made as simple as possible. I do understand that for someone who's completely new to this, it may be a bit more complicated, and it may take quite a bit to actually, understand and use properly. And that's fine. But if you want to go a little further, okay, you should definitely consider what other sports your athletes are doing. Okay, and I had that in the slides earlier. Non-volleyball activities. Okay, so it's a very good idea, if you want to be a bit more detailed, to ask each of your athletes to give you a schedule of their other activities and what they're doing. Okay. And if you want to take the time to start putting that into your seasonal plan, do it. What it's going to do is you can actually do it in a way that you can, with some color coding. Okay, for example, I could have a different tab where I have, my weeks and I have the activities of my players. I could even perhaps find a way to color code this where I have 2 rows for Mondays, 2 rows for Tuesdays, 2 rows for Wednesdays. One is my stuff, one is the activities my players are doing, and then you can color code it so that you can visualize, oh wait, it looks like at the beginning of January or beginning of February, my athletes are really, really busy with like basketball championships of some sort. I don't know, right? Because a couple of them are playing basketball and some are playing hockey, whatever. You visualize it and you say, okay, they're going to be really tired when they come to practice. So maybe I shift a little bit of my skills, right? So I had some plans on working on attacking on a week of January 24th, but they're going to be really tired. So I don't want them to jump while practice. So I'm going to shift this to passing. Okay. So you see how the more information you start to collect and consider in your season plan, the more it's going to then influence your decision. But again, you can't act, you can't or react, right, to things. You can't plan properly unless you do this plan and unless you go into the weeds and start collecting all that information about your players, right? Again, now we're getting a little bit more complex, but definitely something that is taking your season planning to the next level. Okay. We've got excuse me, we've gone a bit long, which I don't mind. I could be here all night talking about this. But I'm just going to ask you if you have any other questions. If anyone has any other questions, obviously you can always email me. Oh, I wanted to mention this earlier, but I forgot. I'm just going to show you this on our website. Okay, when you're in the early contact page here, a bunch of webinars have been added. Okay, so the one on September 13th is the one I told you about, where I'll go into more details about the systems and tactical objectives for early contact streams. But then I'm going to do 3 sessions. They're going to be later in September. They're going to be in the middle of the day, just because of my availability. But they're going to be recorded and posted for those who can't attend at 12 p.m. All right. It's at 12 p.m. because maybe some people are on lunch break and can maybe tune in for a little bit. So that's a hope. But what I'm going to do here is actually use the seasonal plan to plan an actual practice live. Okay. So we'll pull up the practice plan. I will ask people on the call to suggest a week. And then we're going to take that week and I'm going to plan a practice for that week with you live on the webinar. Okay, just to kind of show how I would actually use the seasonal plan to plan a practice, and then to give you some ideas of how to perhaps set up some drills. Okay, for your athletes, and I will do one for each of the 3 streams so that we're very specific to the athletes that we're talking about. Okay, so feel free to check this out and sign up for the sessions. And yeah, I look forward to see you on any of those for a little bit more talk about seasonal planning and early contact. Okay. Okay, there's still a bunch of you still on this call. That's awesome. I couldn't see how many were there. So good for you for sticking with us till the end. Thanks for coming on. And if you have any other questions, you can always email me. I think my email was with your registration on Zoom. So feel free to email me with any questions. I'll be happy to talk to you about season plan. I love that stuff. All right, thanks everyone.